Welcome to episode 21 of the Comfort via Discomfort podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Carly Modolo. Carly is a wonderful person and a tremendous athlete. She is super strong and determined, and she wears her heart on her sleeve, and she has the mindset of a champion. And it's not going to take you very long to see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, you'll get to know Carly quite quickly in this episode. So I want to take this time in this introduction to kind of not warn you, but to let you know what's ahead. The reason for that is because we talk about sexual assault. Unfortunately, something that Carly and I have in common is that we've both been victims of sexual assault. For me, I was raped by a woman in 2019. For Carly, she was sexually assaulted by a massage therapist back in 2017. And that's what we talk about in this episode. One of the real big reasons why we're having this conversation, it's not at all to play the victim card or to have a pity party or anything like that. It is literally to normalize this type of conversation. We think that we know that unfortunately sexual assault happens a lot more than we like to admit. And it's really not talked about as often as it should be. So Carly and I came together on this episode to dive deep into her story. She is so courageous in this episode. She shares so many details of the actual experience with that massage therapist back in 2017. And she shares the roller coaster that the last 6 years have been. The reason for that is because after her experience, she went to the police, and then she went to the College of Massage Therapy of Ontario and reported the incident. And there's been an investigation and everything basically ongoing for the last 6 years. And there's finally going to be a trial this year in 2023. So she's been through the ups and downs of being in a healing stage and then having to relive everything over and over and over again. So we talk a lot about, again, her experience with that massage therapist back in 2017. We talk about the entire process that she's gone through over the last 6 years, including how this has affected her mental health and how she's gone in and out of the healing stage and where she's currently at. So like I said, Carly is really open and honest and vulnerable and courageous in this episode. We really want to try and normalize conversation like this so that more people feel comfortable talking about it, because it happens way more than it ever should. So for anybody who has been through sexual assault, if you're listening, just know that there's always that pause button. If anything that we talk about, any of the graphic details that we talk about trigger you, please feel free to press that pause button, take a break for as long as you need to, and come back to the episode. For anybody that knows somebody that has been through sexual assault, if they've ever opened up to you, I hope that this episode serves as an example of what it's like to be the person that experiences it. My hope is really to show you a different perspective of what it's like going through something like a traumatic experience like that. And if you're somebody who has not been sexually assaulted and you don't know anybody that's been sexually assaulted, that's amazing, because obviously none of us want to have that sort of thing happen to us or to a loved one. But again, I hope you do stick around and listen through the graphic details so that you understand what it could be like if somebody ever opens up to you, or to look for some of the red flags in your life that may come up. So this episode can serve a whole myriad of people. I hope you do stick around and listen to the whole thing, because Carly has some graphic details to share, but also some really interesting insights. And just listening to her talk and the way that she's really mastered her mindset, or really evolved her mindset, is really inspiring. So she's on a mission. She keeps saying that, the massage therapist thought I was weak for some reason, but he picked the wrong girl, because I have been fighting him ever since. And her courageousness and her determination will inspire you as well. So I hope you stick around, and I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the CVD Podcast. I'm here with Carly Modolo. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. Carly, I'm really happy that you're here, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to not only share your story with me, but to try and help other people. So, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm really, I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. Like I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning. I didn't get out of bed until like 6, but as soon as I woke up, my brain was like, okay, how do I plan this introduction? Like, these are the topics we got to go over. Like, I've just been really looking forward to this conversation because I think it's really, really important. And we've got a lot to get to. We've got a lot to unpack. So before I ask you for like a little introduction, I just want to kind of preface what we're going to get into, and then we'll get into your little intro. Okay. So, we've known each other for a few years. I think we connected back in like 2017, 18. And it really didn't take long for us. Well, it took a little bit, but didn't take long. We eventually found that we had something in common that was pretty unfortunate. We've both been the victims of and survivors of sexual assault. And right now, I know that you're currently sort of in the process because you actually like gone and taken the next step. Like there's a whole investigation going on with your case and whatnot. So we're really going to get into that. And I'm like so thankful and grateful that you're willing to talk about it because as you and I have mentioned before, like it's something that happens way more than we think. And nobody talks about it. It's not talked about enough. And that could be because of the stigma around it. Could be due to people are going to blame you and oh, you're playing the victim card. You just want attention, all this stuff. It could be because of the system is broken and very frustrating to navigate. Could be a number of things. And like I said, I'm just really thankful that you're here and willing to speak about it because every conversation will definitely make a difference. So thank you for your courage to share your story and for your vulnerability to really put your life out there in the spirit of helping other people. So thank you so much for being able to do that or being willing to do that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to.
Yeah, I know you are. And we were just talking about our goals for this episode. So the first thing I want to talk about is the sexual assault that we were just mentioning. I want to really dive into your experience and the process that you've gone through over the last 6 years and the fact that like you can live somewhat of a normal life afterwards. You and I are both big advocates that there is a healing process. Obviously, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be really difficult. There's a lot of unpacking. There's a lot of hard work that needs to be done, but there is potential to live a normal life even after something like this happens. And I know you mentioned your goal. Do you want to quickly mention that before we get into some things?
Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
My goal in it would be for other victims to understand that they're not the ones at fault, for them to stop victim blaming. I think that's the biggest thing. Instead of healing, they're always trying to figure out what they did wrong, how they could have protected themselves better. In their head, they wish the situation went a different way because I know I was that way. I always said, like, not being in the situation originally, how I would react if it ever happened to me. And sometimes you don't react in the way in which you think you would. And that takes a really big toll on you afterwards because you don't know how to protect yourself. You don't know what's best for you. There's a lot of self-doubt, even outside of the abuse itself. So I hope that other victims find peace and comfort in this episode, and they open up the conversation to talk about it more openly, and we can normalize this conversation. Mental health has been normalized quite a bit over the years, and I think sexual assault needs to be in the same category as that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm so excited that we're getting into this because it's a big step. And I hope that, men and women that listen to this episode are inspired by your courageousness and your vulnerability and your willingness to go through some shit to really actually go through the investigation and try to get justice in your case. Because like I said, that's not an easy thing to do. So just wanted to make our goals kind of clear up front. But yeah, we're going to talk about the first thing, which is the sexual assault experience and everything in to do with that. And then you're also a tremendous athlete. You are, you've done half Ironmans and Ironmans, and I admire you for doing all of that because I've completed 3 marathons. I know what it's like to train for those. And you're not only running, but you're swimming and biking and doing it a lot further than I am. So I admire all of the hard work that you put into that. And I really want to dive into why you choose to do that to yourself, why you put yourself through that crap, why you go through the discomfort. And I'm sure there's some commonalities, but I definitely want to get your take on
sure. That. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
a good way to say it.
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, if we spend all of our time like on the sexual assault experience, because it obviously is super important and there's a lot to get through, then I'll just have to have you back for part 2 and we'll go through the Ironman stuff. Awesome. All right. Good. So now let's get into just a little bit of an introduction. So before we get into the kind of hard stuff, if you will. Tell me who Carly Modolo is as a person, and then what you do for a living, and then we'll get into stuff.
All right. So basically right to it. I'm a LaSalle native. I moved to Windsor when I was 26 years old, when I first got my own house. I work full-time at Chrysler. I've been there for 7 years. I work part-time at a swim store because a full-time job isn't enough for me. So I'm at Lee Sports. It's a very good local swim store. One of the only ones south of Mississauga, actually, that specializes in swimwear for all competitions and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I guess me as a person, I want to motivate as many people as possible. If there's one thing people can take away from my story or anything, I want them to persevere. I want them to be inspired to try something new, or because of you, I did this. I don't care what people think of my appearance, basically how many podiums I've had or what I've accomplished. I want them to take something positive away from something I've gone through. I've been much more like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I always have. I unfortunately have no poker face. So if I'm upset, you're going to know it. If I'm super happy, you're going to know it. There is no surprise with me. I am an open book. It is both a blessing and a curse. And it is also my biggest attribute and my biggest weakness.
Wow, that is fantastic. And I'm so happy that you've shared some of that I knew about you, some of that I didn't. I mean, I know that you wear your heart on your sleeve. It doesn't take long to figure that one out. You also wear your smile on your sleeve, because every race photo that I've ever seen of you on Facebook, you're like, I'm biking 100 miles. You're like, and I mean, like, yeah. I mean, when I've done my races, I've seen the camera and I'm like, hey, what's up? Or whatever. So I know that's a moment in time. There might be some non-smiling during the race.
You know what? I admit, I never see those cameras. I'm so happy when I'm racing. I actually race with a smile on my face.
Wow.
Because it takes so much more energy to frown and scowl. And when I'm out there, I realize I'm doing what I love to do. Even if I'm slow, I'm like, okay, you know what? This hill is horrible, but I'm going to smile up this damn thing because eventually the whole day is going to be over. And then it's just a distant memory. So I like to, even when it's been pouring rain or I've been sick as a dog during a race or a fractured foot, I'm still out there smiling. And maybe that sounds a little deranged or different, but I've just always been that way.
Oh,
so
no,
it's not like, oh, I see the camera, now let's smile. No, I've always been that athlete.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, I was just poking fun by saying the camera thing, but it's great to know that you are smiling the whole time. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't see them. There have been times like I'm looking at the photos afterwards and I'm like, where was that camera? And I look at, I don't even remember them being out there. Where were they?
Oh man, that's funny. Sometime like my last race in Detroit, like I was like, oh yeah, that one was at mile 21. This one was at mile 15. Like I knew exactly where they were because I was just like, hey, what's up?
That's cool because you can enjoy your pictures like that.
Yeah.
I've had some though where I'm like, yikes, I wish I would have saw that camera.
Yeah, it's so funny because like I look back at some of my photos and like my first marathon was in Miami, and that one was, we've talked a little bit about, and maybe we'll get into it later, was a a lot of my ego was driving that one. And so like the photos that I have of that one, I'm like flexing and like, or whatever. And then in Detroit, I'm just like, what's up?
Adam.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just happy to be here. I'm not, completely crippled, so I'm still moving forward.
Absolutely.
Oh man, that's so funny. And I'm really looking forward to getting into your story about like the Ironmans and how they started and your competitive spirit and everything, because to be smiling through a race like that, I mean, it takes a lot of willpower, I would assume. So
Absolutely. You train your brain as much as your body.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so we'll definitely get into that a little bit later on. And like you said, you were working full-time Chrysler, working part-time at a swim store, and training for these like ridiculously long events. So I don't know where you have time to be on this podcast, but thank you for making the time, because I really appreciate it. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Alrighty. So there's no easy way to transition into this. So let's just kind of get into it. I was reading back a couple of weeks ago. I was reading back through our messages, and it was back in I think 2019 when we found out what we had in common, that we were both victims of and survivors of sexual assault. And I know that you want to inspire people. I know that you want to tell your story and try to help other people, which is really, really incredible. So let's kind of get into things. So I know that you were sexually assaulted by a massage therapist. And so do you want to take me through a little bit about like what happened, and then we can kind of go from there?
Yeah. So it was first time I'd ever gone to see a massage therapist was October 29th of 2017. And, it was pretty normal. I'd actually say that he was nicer than most. I probably should have been aware of that. I now know that he was actually grooming me to see how far he could have gone at the next appointment. And it's sickening to say, but I didn't see it that way. My dad was in the waiting room the whole time. I was signing out the documents and whatnot. And for whatever reason, I thought about taking a picture of my form. And I don't know why, but I'm glad I did. And I'll get into that a bit later as to why I'm glad I did that. But my dad was there. And the whole time, the therapist kept trying to get my dad to leave. And my dad kept saying, no, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to wait right here. He kept saying, oh, is there any errands you need to run or anything? So the fact that my dad stayed there that night, I think, protected me. When the therapist was in the room with me, he had explained everything he was going to do. He was, I wouldn't say professional, but I didn't have any like doubts about him at the time, I guess.
There weren't any like glaring, like super big red flags or anything.
No, there was nothing. He was, like I said, I think he was trying to be over friendly to gain my trust.
Right.
So what I received that day, I felt like he actually helped me, because the reason I went to him in the first place was I had a stress fracture in my foot, and I had an Ironman like 10 days out from that day. And a friend of mine at the time, she recommended me to him, and I was more than open to going. I just wanted to walk. I was basically crawling around my house, or I was limping, and I thought, I have an Ironman and I need to figure out how I'm going to get to this point.
And you were still yeah, I was going to say, you're still looking to complete.
Yes, it was getting finished. That's why I was looking for a miracle, as like, okay, I'm desperate. Please help rehabilitate my foot. And in that desperation, he really took advantage of that. So it was the day after, I had talked to my dad the night before, and I said how great I felt. I was able to walk after, like, he really did help my foot. And then when I went back the next night, my dad had just dropped me off. And the first thing the therapist had said to me is, are you here alone? And I should have like turned around and ran out the door, because I actually did hear alarm bells in my head, and it didn't feel right. And there was nobody else in the office at all. There was no other clients, no receptionist, nobody else. He locked the door behind me in the building. He made sexual remarks to me. The way in which he practiced was completely illegal. Like, I did not have the sheet on me anymore. He massaged my breasts. the top of like my pubic bone, my
So
glute,
you had no top sheet on you
nothing.
whatsoever. Okay.
I had nothing. No,
Yeah.
no. And all he had on my chest was like a towel. And he flipped that over completely and just massaged the left side of my breast completely and then the right. And the crazy part about that was, and I'll never forget this till the day I die, is he touched my shoulders and said, "Do you mind if I massage your upper chest?" When you're grabbing my shoulders, you're making me think that it's my shoulders, my clavicle. And that's when he like removed the towel and just started massaging my boobs and said that was normal, like that was normal in practice. Called it an exercise called rib springing.
Called, I'm sorry, what?
Rib springing, apparently where you press on somebody's ribs and it's supposed to help with breathing. He was not on my ribs. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah.
And the only thing that really told me that something was going on was I having piercings, like my nipples being pierced. And the only reason I mention that is because the scrub was embedded that he used to rub it on my body, which didn't make sense either, was in the piercing itself. And that staying there was a constant reminder to me that, okay, this actually happened. This, you're not imagining this. You're being abused right now. You need to get out of this situation. And all I kept saying was, I can't. That's the only words that came out of my mouth. And at some point, he must have got spooked and he left. And I locked the door behind me. I got dressed and I texted and called my mom for help. At least, oh God, like I blew up her phone. And crazy enough, she told me that night she was already on her way back. She felt that something was wrong. And he must have unlocked the building door at that time. And my mom came flying back within minutes. It's like she knew something was going on. And when she arrived in the back room, she explained to me that I looked like a 5-year-old child that had just seen a ghost. My face was completely pale. I couldn't look at anybody. I just stared at the ground. I wouldn't look at him. And my mom was in the room with him and she didn't know what had happened to me yet. And she just kept looking at me like, "Car, what's wrong?" And I couldn't say anything to her. And at that point, he was trying to wrap my foot and tape it and be all professional again. When earlier, like from the comments he made about my skin being so soft too, he had a towel over my eyes because he said the light was going to bother me. And I left it there because I could see the way he was looking at me. He was looking at me like a predator. Like I felt like he was a wolf and I was a deer in the woods. And he wanted to see how far he could push me. And at one point, he even tried to feed me an orange. I don't even know where this orange came from. Yeah, exactly. He made a tea at one point, kept trying to get me to drink from it. And I said no. And then he forced me to. And I took a drink from the tea and then he drank it right after and said that our lips were touching the same spot. And it just everything about from what he said to what he did to how he conducted himself. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. I felt very small, very fragile. When he finished taping my foot, I literally ran out of the entire building without looking back. And my mom had chased after me and she like had to run. And my mom does not run. And she ran after me and she's like, "What is going on?" I said, "You just need to get me out of here now. I need to leave. I can't." And she's like, "What is going on?" And that's when I told her, I said, "Mom, he just sexually abused me." And she spun around and was going to storm back in the building. And I guess she said he was closing the blinds and everything. And I physically picked up my mom and basically put her in the car and begged her to get me out of there. I begged her. I said, "Just please, I need to go. I just want to go. I want to go home and shower. I just want to go home and cry. Like, get me out of here." So when I got home, it was, like I said, I showered. Those piercings had that scrub in it. I felt sick to my stomach. To this day, I still don't like anything about my chest or being touched. I'm very insecure about it. It brings back triggers and memories that I wish I never had to experience, but unfortunately I did. I called the police that night and I told them, "Look, I'm getting on a plane in less than 8 hours to go to Florida for my first Ironman." Said, "Now I have a broken foot and I was just sexually abused." And my coach didn't know. My dad didn't know. I tried calling him, tried calling my sister. Nobody had picked up. So it was just my mom and I were the only real ones that knew what was going on. I called the girl who recommended me to him, told her exactly what happened. And when I had talked to the police, they had told me, okay, we need you to come in and give a statement. And I said, just let me do this Ironman and I will give you whatever you need when I get back. I just need to finish this race. So when I had gotten into Atlanta at the layover for Florida, I had finally gotten a hold of my dad. And when my mom told him what happened, my dad was crying on the other end of the line.
Oh, of
And
course.
he blames himself in a sense because he did leave me that night.
Right.
And I tried to explain to him it wasn't his fault. This guy clearly had this planned. For whatever reason, he considered me weak. And that was his biggest mistake because I haven't stopped fighting him since. Though when I came back and I gave the police everything they wanted, my statement, he had actually texted me after I finished the Ironman and congratulated me, but also was trying to express that he was so grateful he had a big role in helping rehabilitate me.
Oh, fuck off.
So yeah, it was absolutely disgusting reading that message. And I didn't have him in my phone. I knew it was him because of how he was texting. He had sent an expedited letter to my house. So it's like, you used my cell phone number, you used my mailing address, and he actually sent me a bill, for being abused. So he expected me to pay for that, which obviously I never did. And the crazy thing was, he sent me a sheet of all the things he was trying to do and how it was supposed to help me.
Oh, of course.
And yeah, so there was that. And then he also tried to guilt trip me by explaining that he took the time out of his busy day when he had a funeral to go to and had some family stuff going on. And he wanted to be there for me so I could have the best race possible. And I said, do whatever is necessary to rehabilitate me. And when I had actually looked at the sheet that I had circled what needed work, which was my foot, he circled every part of my body and somehow got my signature from my original sheet and transferred it onto that. And actually, it was all his handwriting. And I have that documented to this day. So when it does, it is part of the evidence that he did alter official documents to try and look like I was okay with what was happening.
I'm so happy you took a picture of that. Wow.
Yeah, I know my own handwriting. I don't write in all caps. I can't. If I try, it starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it just looks like I don't even know. Somebody in JK was trying to spell their name for the first time. So that all being said and done, the police ended up dismissing me. I was super shocked. They didn't really give me a reason why. They just dropped it. So I didn't drop it. I went to the College of Massage Therapy of Ontario right after. I sent them the same exact statement that I gave the police. They took it more seriously. They got private investigators involved. They interviewed my mom and me separately. I had to watch my own statement back, which actually was super heartbreaking to see how fragile I was. So I had to watch that and make sure it was still true, which it was. Nothing changed.
Wow, man, I'm sorry to jump in, but it just like giving your statement is like going through this process is one thing. Giving your statement about all of this is one thing. Super difficult as it is, and they sit there and they make you watch it back. I mean, yes. I guess I understand for the make sure everything's true because this is a really big deal. But wow, that's such a traumatic experience that you already went through. You're going through another one, giving your statement, and then they're like, you know what? Just watch it again. Just watch yourself give this statement. Yeah. Wow.
I had to watch the entire video interview.
Oh my goodness.
And I had to see how small I felt in comparison to obviously where I am now. But it was super hard. I wanted to give that girl a hug. And I realized, holy crap, that's me. I have to watch all of this. And so I had to. So the thing, people don't realize that when you come forward, how difficult and painful it is. Because not only are you still reliving it, there's things you don't even consider. After that was said and done, it took a long time for me to hear anything. I was actually in Niagara Falls with my sister when they had contacted me and said a few other people have come forward. And we have enough for him to at least civilly lose his practice license for good.
And when was that? Time frame?
2019. It was cold outside because I remember having photos in winter coats. So I'm gonna say it was around October of 2019.
So 2 years after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, almost 2 full years after, and you had given a statement to the police. You had given a statement to, I'm sorry, it was called the College Massage.
CMTO. Yeah. College of Massage Therapy of Ontario.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, this was when it was like, okay, some other people have come forward, and we can actually look into. So the private investigation took that long. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, actually, the private investigator even came to my house. We talked about some things. She even interviewed my mom at the casino, where I couldn't have any contact with my mom the entire day, because they had to make sure that what my mom was saying was true. So it was really hard on both of us, because my mom being there to take care of me, obviously, it's gutted her, and it still really has affected her. So we had found out he was going to lose his license at least. We couldn't go after him criminally because the police had already dismissed me. So I figured the only case of justice I was going to get was him losing his license.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be clear, when I said I wanted justice, it wasn't for me. What he did to me, the damage was done. I can't go back and undo that, as much as sometimes I wish I could. I wanted to make sure other people weren't going to get hurt because of him. I didn't want anybody else to be in this position, and I knew it was my job, for whatever reason, to be the one to take him down.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2020, it was supposed to actually be an in-person thing, but because of COVID, it was done over a phone call, and he was coward enough to hide behind his lawyer. He didn't even get on the call. And my mom and my sister had asked me, what do you want to do that day? And I had said, if he loses his license, I said, I don't want to be in Windsor. I want to freaking celebrate. I said, let's go to Grand Bend. We'll listen to this call there. And I said, honestly, then I just want to get drunk. I want to drink and have fun and laugh and just be myself again. And I actually had my sister design a tattoo for me as well, that I was going to get if he lost his license. So on the call, they explained the few charges that were laid against him for sexual assault. And he was, the crazy thing is, you can't say convicted and you can't say he was found guilty, because they never actually said those words. However, he did lose his license permanently. So everything I wanted that day happened. My mom was crying. I didn't really cry because I was just over it. I didn't want to cry anymore. I was just excited. I was like, finally, other people are protected. Like, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
And that was it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to jump in again, but first of all, I mean,
okay.
like, I had no idea that, I mean, obviously I know that sexual assault is extremely traumatic. I had no idea, like, all of the details that had happened. And so, like, first of all, like, I'm really sorry that you had to go through all of that, because obviously, like, I like I said, I have a wave of emotions just listening to you describe this, and I'm sure that anybody listening to this episode will feel something. They'll feel anger and frustration and empathy and so many different things, because I'm just like, it gave me chills like up my back, you just describing this. And I'm just like, I feel for you so much, because obviously, you know, massage therapy on its own, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position. You're literally laying 95% naked on a table for somebody to put their hands on you so that you can heal in a specific way. And the fact that somebody just had the audacity to completely take advantage of you is and of other people is ridiculous. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And just like before, I've said it and I'll say it like 400 times again, like, I admire you so much for doing what you're doing and for speaking up about it and for going through the process, because I mean, I know the thing is still ongoing. Even if it stopped at him just getting his license taken away, that's a huge, huge win. And I commend you for going through that. And like you said, he thought you were weak, but you're the strongest motherfucker that he could have picked on that day. Because you are not stomping. And that's one of the things that, again, like, I just really admire you for. So just wanted to say that before you continue. And like you said, it's so weird because they can't say that he's guilty. They can't say that he's convicted, because none of those things happened at that time. But he did lose his license, which is a huge win. And just quickly before you continue with your story, you mentioned your mom and your dad obviously both played pretty big roles in this story, and I can't
Yes,
imagine what they have gone through. What they have gone through as well, like as secondary sort of people in this story, because your
for
mom
sure.
literally picked you up that day, and your
Yes.
dad was with you one day while the appointment was going on, and then kind of just dropped you off the next day. So he wasn't there when it actually happened. Have you had conversations with your parents about like their experiences with like that day and how they've dealt
Well,
with it, how they've healed?
I want to clarify, it wasn't during the day. It was super late in the evening, actually,
Okay.
like almost like an after hours situation. And he had me there for hours.
Mm,
It wasn't yeah, I was there for hours. Um, so I was stuck in a position where I couldn't get out of for longer than I wanted to.
yeah, no kidding.
Uh, I try, like, it's tough because for them, I know they never want to see, like, like, my sister and I are everything to my parents,
Hmm.
as to most parents feel about their children. So I've tried having the conversation with both of them, but I don't think I've ever gotten to a place where they want to. My mom is a lot more open with me than my dad is. My dad is very much a little bit hardwired. He's not very emotional. So when he cried about that, it was heartbreaking for me because I've never actually seen my dad cry or hear him cry. And I don't think he talks about it purposely, because I think his way of healing is just trying to forget that it happened.
Yeah.
And I know everybody heals differently, so I've never forced him to heal in a way that I need to heal. So I think there is a conversation in the future that needs to be had, but with it still being ongoing, I don't think now is the time. So there's that, but I definitely do think soon it will be something that I discuss. I've tried before,
Hmm.
but I haven't gotten very far.
Well, like you said,
So
like everybody heals differently. Everybody's got their own
yeah.
experience that they had that day, their own process of healing and whatnot. So obviously, you can't force anything. I asked because I when I went through that experience, the first people that I had a conversation with were my parents, because they had no idea what had happened. I was living in Boston at the time. They were in Windsor, Ontario, and so they had no idea what had gone on. And through
Mhm.
my therapy sessions, like I found out that I was withholding like a lot of information from people that I loved. And my
Mhm.
therapist is like, Adam, like, how do you expect people to support you if they have no idea what's going on in your life? Like, actually. And I was like, huh, that's a really
Yeah.
good point. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it was a big step for me in my healing process to have that conversation. And I'll never forget that one, because like it was just on a video call, because like we were living in different
Yeah.
places, which was really emotional, really tough to have. And
For sure.
like I said, I can't imagine like what your mom was feeling in that moment, to be like in the room and seeing you, like you said, like a 5-year-old girl, like seeing a ghost, like just blue in the face and just almost frozen. So just wanted to quickly sort of touch on that. You mentioned that so 2 years after, about 2 years, they said that he could get his license taken away. Eventually in
Yes.
2020, it happened. You were in
Hmm.
Grand Bend, and the tattoo and everything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
take it from there. What happened next?
All right. So from there, I thought it was done. I took it upon myself at that point to do my best to put it in the past. I did go see a few different therapists. I didn't find it was very helpful for me. Not because what they had to say wasn't helpful, but I didn't like. Um, for me, I found a lot of the therapists I've gone to, they look down on their clients. That's how I see it. I much rather talk to friends or be in a community group setting where I can relate to somebody else, or somebody can relate to me, or we can just talk things through. And as you know, I love my exercise. So a lot of the times I did a lot of self healing. I bought some trauma workbooks where I actually like wrote things down and worked through things. I bought some journals. I bought it's called the Rape Recovery Handbook. Like I have so many different um, tools to help me heal. And I think it really worked. But as you know, through healing, it's exhausting because to get over it in a sense, and I don't like that word, but you have to go through it. So there's no shortcuts. There's no, okay, there's many times where I would just read one chapter and I'd have to stop because
it's
it was
heavy.
just so overwhelming. Yeah, there's a lot to go through. And then there's a lot of emotions you unpack at the same time.
You're
so,
almost like reliving.
You know,
You're reliving some of the trauma and also trying to understand these new things that are coming up. And sometimes I'm done. I'm just pause. Like I need to take a break and go for a run, do something else where my mind will just not, not trying to process everything at once. Yeah.
No, for sure. So, I was really coming to terms with things, and there was one night at Chrysler where, of course, it's crazy how everything always happens all at once. So I was working and I was on the line actually talking to my doctor about anxiety, funny enough. And all of a sudden I see everybody sprinting off the line, like literally running out of Chrysler. And I'm looking at everybody going, what is going on? Like I have my little hammer in my hands and I'm putting the door panel on and I'm like, is this some type of joke? Like, why is everybody sprinting and why is everybody fighting to get out of here? And the leader's screaming at me, didn't you hear? Get the F out of here. And I'm like, where am I supposed to go? And apparently he's like, home. I'm like, okay. So we're all outside and I was like, oh, we're supposed to leave? Like, okay. So we left and I had gotten a call later that night and it was from like no caller ID. And I picked up and it was a detective with the OPP and I had explained, look, I don't know anything that happened at Chrysler. Like we just, like I was on the door line kind of where it happened, but farther down the line. So I don't know. And he said, no, this is against your case with the massage therapist. And at that point, I instantly started bawling and shaking because I hadn't heard his name brought up. And
especially from the OPP, like this is new because they disregarded everything from the beginning.
Absolutely. And he was speaking so fast and I only remember small snippets, but he had said that we're reopening your case. We believe you. There's more victims. He's getting arrested later this week. And I thought I was in a dream in a sense. Like I still have goosebumps when I say it because I had waited so long to be believed. And even in the community, I took a lot of backlash and people silently whispering that this didn't happen to me. And though I knew my truth, it feels like you're drowning from the inside out. I actually did an article as well with somebody who did a LaSalle Post article with me about a little bit about what I was going through. And I explained like I would never want my sister or my best friend or cousin or anybody to go through this. There's so much self-doubt. There's so much self-hatred, confusion with even how you want to treat your body. Like, do you just not care and just go sleep with whoever because you've already been violated? Or do you just stay to yourself and never let anybody in again? Mm-hmm. Like there are so many different ways in which people of abuse handle things. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that. Like it doesn't mean you want to be that person that goes around and sleeps with people, but that might be your way of taking control back of your body. Yeah. And I did have a phase where I was like that because I was trying to assume dominance in myself again. And I had learned something in therapy once and I loved it. And they said, you cannot say yes to sex until you can say no to it. And I thought that was so powerful because I had always thought at that point, this is what people use me for. This was my purpose. And it really messed me up for a while.
Yeah, my goodness.
And with that phone call from the OPP, it was finally like, okay, this is starting over in a sense though. And I was scared because I didn't know what was to come. But I also was grateful that other people had come forward. The reason I feel that I'm the one who started this movement was because nobody else stood up when I did. Had they, it wouldn't have been my word against him. I would have had somebody else on my side, and I was standing alone at the time. It took nearly 5 years for people to, basically join my little army.
And you said the other day that you found out that there were, I think, 6 or 7 victims total, and 5 of them came before you. Is that right?
There is, I don't know how many, I know there was one after me, but for the most part, most were before.
Yeah.
So that's the crazy part because, and I don't blame them. I totally understand where they're coming from. After everything I've gone through over the years, I totally understand and I sympathize with them. And if anything, I would just give them a hug. I would never be mad at them for it because I get it. But at the same time, the other part of me was like, damn, why didn't you stand with me? Why didn't you kind of help protect me? Why? But I can't wonder about those what ifs anymore because I would drive myself insane with hypotheticals. So now I'm kind of just worrying about what's right in front of me and realizing the important part is they did come forward.
Yeah.
Now we do stand a chance with them reopening the case and with him being arrested. Like there actually could be a trial. As of a few days ago, I found out that the case will be brought to the courts on February 11th. And on February 27th, there will be a pre-motion trial, meaning they will either determine what the trial date is, like bring all the evidence together so there's no surprises in court, if he wants to plead guilty to some or all charges, or what his defense will be.
Wow.
So February 27th is going to be, yeah, gives me goosebumps still.
Oh
and
man,
I promised that a few days ago.
It's so weird hearing this because like I'm so happy, but I'm so like distraught at the same time. Like describing all of these things and all of this is like so much emotional energy, so many emotions coming up that I feel for you. And then again, like so thankful and grateful that you are doing this. And again, so much admiration for the fact that you're putting yourself through this because like the trauma is one thing. The experience that you have with your mom and your dad afterwards is another thing. Trying to heal from that is another thing. And then going through this process that is now going on pretty much 6 years, almost 6 years, 5.5, 6 years is really, really wild. And like the fact that it's coming to this and I'm so like proud of you for having the mindset that you do, because as you just explained, like you could be mad, you could be frustrated that nobody came before you, but the reality is they are with you now. And it's super unfortunate that you went through the experience that you went through. But like you said earlier, like you cannot change that. There's nothing that you'll be able to do to undo that. And so you have to put yourself in that sort of present mindset where it's like, this case is coming to an actual head, like it is happening. And now we have more people that are standing with me. So like, good for you for being the first one, even though it wasn't the ideal situation, I guess, but good for you for being the first one and for having the mindset that you do, because without you, this thing would never be where it is right now.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about it that way. Cause it's weird because I don't want to like be proud of myself for something like this, but at the same time I am, because it does take so much strength to actually go through with it. But at the same time, I'm very grateful because so many people that have been abused and have brought it to the attention of police officers or the justice system, they don't even get nearly as far into the process as I have. Even though it's taken me this long, I have a lot of gratitude to the OPP for reopening this case, for standing by my side finally. And with all these other people, I don't even know if they're all women. I don't know who they are. I have no idea. So I'm not going to generalize that because I don't know. There have been a lot of things that they have said are possibilities, like the fact that there could be video footage of what he did to some of us. I don't know. I don't even know everything involved.
I'm so frustrated. Like I'm so cringy in my skin because like this stuff makes me sick. But again, like we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it.
It's, there's so much that I probably don't even know right now. And it's only going to unfold from here. But once everything happens in February, like that's going to be, I think, the biggest telltale sign of what's to come of this. And I don't really know how I'm going to be. I mean, I admit that when I found out, as soon as I found out what was happening, I bawled my eyes out and I was by myself in my house and I thought, I do not want to be alone right now. I went to the mall and went shopping. I bought a pair of leather pants that I did not need because I was just like, I'm so sad. I want to feel better about myself. So I'm like, oh, these pants look good. Okay, here. So,
Oh, you're funny. But yeah, that's a response
yeah.
to this stuff. Like you just don't know. Like and again, like that's why there's so much admiration, and this is why so many people don't go through this process, because they want to move on from it, even in their own way. And in no way, I want to be very, very clear, in no way we're saying that one healing way is better than another, or that you're better than anybody else for going through this process, or I'm better than anybody else for healing the way I healed. That's not at all what we're getting at whatsoever. Like the fact that so many people go through this is traumatic enough and sad enough as it is. And again, this conversation is really to help people see that they're not alone, and that it's okay to heal the way that you need to heal, and that it's okay to talk to people about this. And in fact, you can heal from being vulnerable with other people and to talking about that. And that could be, like in my sense, it was going to a therapist and then talking to my parents and then opening up to some of my friends, some close to me and some that I had just met. Whereas in your case, you're like, therapy didn't necessarily work for me. Like it wasn't, I just really didn't feel right. And I actually felt a lot better talking to friends and talking to other people in the community about what had happened, because that was my way of healing. So there's so many different ways to go about it. The fact that there could be video footage is so cringy. I mean, there's already so many cringy moments, but it's so cringy. But if there is, that also means that there is more proof against what he's done. And that's such a tough thing to think about. Like you and I have talked about this already, like a few times, where it's like, I'm proud of myself, but I'm also like, should I be proud of this for what's happened? And man, I mean, you should 100% be proud of yourself, because this, like I said, this would not be at all where it is if it wasn't for you. Whether we get into the Ironman athlete part of Carly or not, like we're going to have a follow-up conversation after all of this stuff happens, because like it's going to be really interesting to hear how you've sort of processed through things and whatnot. So you're going to obviously keep me updated on that.
I promise you right now, I have not processed much. It's been a pretty depressing week.
Yeah.
It's been hard.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
I've relived a lot of the triggers, to be honest. I definitely, like, even at yoga yesterday, like I did hot yoga, and like she asked you if you want like a cold towel on your forehead after. And the one girl I saw was over her eyes, and I freaked right out. And I was like, no, can't do it. And like I turned away, and I'm like, okay, you're safe. Like, it's crazy the things you take for granted. But, and I know, like, I'm not sitting here saying my story is the worst in the world, but I think it's important to realize that there should never be a comparison with mental health, with sexual abuse, because everybody handles things their own pace, their own way, in their own time. So, because there's somebody else that's involved in the case that I am, and she said, well, what happened to me wasn't as bad as what happened to you. And I stopped her and I said, there is no comparison. We are on the same team, fighting for justice from the same person that did us wrong. I said, that's what it comes down to. I'm not trying to win this trophy by any means. This is not, it's not a competition. The only time I'm competing is on the race course. And for this, we're on the same team. We all want the same thing, which is justice. I hope that we all receive that. I hope that we all are able to heal from this. I know she personally has let this go long ago. I never did. I couldn't. I didn't like the thought of knowing that. The thing is, when you silence your own voice, you give power to the person who hurt you. And you give them indirect permission to continue what they're doing, because you're not going to bring them down. I heard it in a documentary on Netflix. It was called The Killer Nurse. I don't know if you watched it, but detectives asked him why he never stopped killing patients. And he said flat out, nobody ever stopped me. They knew what I was doing, but they never stopped me. And I'll be damned if I don't do everything in my power to try and stop this one.
Oh man, this gives me chills. Like I'm so like I'm cheering
Mic
you.
drop.
Yeah, seriously. Like we're just ending it. We're just ending it there. No, seriously. I'm cheering for you so much, and for anybody else that's going through anything like this, because it needs to happen. I really hope they do lay the hammer down and make this an example of an example for other people to see, because like this is a big deal. It needs to be taken seriously. This victim blaming shit sucks. And
Yes.
I actually want to get into some of that with you, because I mean, like we've gone through the sort of the story and the process of like where you're at and stuff. And I want to
Yeah,
dig into a little bit. And I mean, this is both sides talking about like our
for sure.
experience and whatnot. Especially because like you've been on this 6-year battle of
hmm
actually taking it to court and trying to get justice for it. On my side, that didn't happen. Like I was asked if I wanted to launch an investigation, and at the time I was like, no, like I want to have a face-to-face conversation with this woman and like tell her that what she did was wrong. And I've talked
Yeah.
with my therapist about it. I've talked with a few of my close friends about it. And like my healing process was talking with the people that were closest to me, talking to friends and family, because I realized I really needed to open up and actually tell people about more things that were happening in my life. Not necessarily that specific thing, but I needed to tell more people about it. But yeah, I really want to get into some of the things that that you did to heal from this, and I'll mention some of the things that I did as well. And then I mean, obviously, like you said, you've been reliving it over and over again because of this process. And so I kind of want to get into some of those things because I think they're really important to talk about, because like we said, we want to focus on the healing process, and hopefully something that we mentioned can help somebody else as well.
So here, I don't know how much help I'm going to be because I'm not healing right now. I'm reliving it again. I can't really heal because I have to reread my statement. I have to commit it to memory, because if this does go to a trial, I need to make sure I know every detail inside and out. So all the healing I did on forgetting small details and his touch and what he said and how he did things and what he did, I have to commit it to memory now. My biggest fear is obviously going on trial. The fact that I could get cross-examined, the fact that they could explain that it being my first massage is my fault. Like the amount of things that have gone through my mind in the past few days, I'm not at a healing stage. I'm very grateful I'm single at this point in my life. Even though I was in a long-term relationship and that did end recently, I think it's a blessing because I don't want to drag anyone else through this with me. I don't want to put anybody in a state where they feel sorry for me or they feel bad for me. By all means, I love the support and I appreciate that. But that's not who I am. That's not what I'm looking for. I want justice for not just myself, but for the future of people, even for other massage therapists that do practice properly. This tarnishes the whole thing, in my opinion. It's not just the one therapist who did this. Anybody who tells me they're a massage therapist, I kind of just look at them like, I hope you practice legally. I hope, and it's wrong for me to think that way, but my experience has tarnished my outlook on this entire practice. I don't believe I ever will get another massage in my life. I personally I know my triggers. People asked if I'd go see a female, and I still said no. It's the small room. It's the like the small bed. It's feeling locked in. I can't do it. None of it. It's too traumatizing for me, and I'm not going to put myself in harm's way again. And that to me is harmful.
Yeah.
So
And
the best way I'm healing is learning my triggers and avoiding them if I can.
yeah, and that's really interesting. And I mean, you mentioned it obviously right away, like I'm not in a healing stage right now, which is I think an interesting situation for you to be in because of the process and everything. And one thing that we had talked about in a previous conversation that you just mentioned was some people just say, oh, like why don't you go see a female massage therapist? And you're like great, but technically like a female can still perform these types of these types of acts. Not saying that, of course, anybody like that I know would do that, and not to generalize it at all. But just because they're the same sex as you doesn't mean that this couldn't happen. And that's not the point. Like, the point is there are so many, like you said, little triggers that happen that will just send your body into fight or flight response. And people that have been through a sexual assault or have been taken advantage of or have been raped, like, they will understand like what these sometimes seemingly little tiny things are actual triggers. Like you mentioned in yoga the other day, it didn't even happen to you. You saw somebody get a towel put over their eyes because they asked for it, and you went, "Oh God, no."
Yeah.
Right? Like, somebody might be looking at you and being like, what the heck is the big deal? It's a freaking towel. But that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, they have no idea what your story is or why you're reacting that way. So some things from another perspective that seem really small aren't necessarily really small. So it's not the fact that it's male or female. It's the fact that, like, there's so many little things that can happen inside or like during this experience that would set you off. And you're like, this is not for me. Like, I can find other ways to heal my body other than going to see a massage therapist.
And I think it was great what you said there was, and what I took away from my own experience is, because something like that towel freaks me out and people were probably like, what's her problem? When other people kind of freak out about something or react in a different way that maybe we wouldn't consider normal, I'm more empathetic to them than judgmental now, because you don't know their story. You don't know what they're not sharing with you or what they're afraid to disclose. And I think when you said fight or flight, there's something a lot of people forget, which is freeze. And I was that. I froze. Like I said, all I kept saying was, I can't. That's all that came out of my mouth. I couldn't even speak like a normal human. Like, I was, like I said, in high school, I received the English award every year. I couldn't put a sentence together. I would have never expected myself to be like that. Like, in my head, I wish I would have kicked his ass. But something that one therapist did help me with briefly was, she said, rewrite that story for yourself. Be your own hero in that. You know what actually happened. Now rewrite it to what will help you heal. However, now I have to go back to the OG story to make sure that, and that's the thing. That's another thing with healing is, if you do go through with prosecution or this being a possibility, it does take a long time, and it's not a quick resolution, and it is almost more painful to relive it than to go through it the first time, because now people question you on it. Now people try and figure out, okay, is this true? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? When you know your truth, but you can't make somebody else see what you experienced. You can do the best of your abilities, but I'm really hoping that it's enough. But at the end of the day, I cannot base my healing on the resolution that the courts may have, because that might be really detrimental to me. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And now it's literally somebody's job to try and disprove you. Like, that's intimidating. And what's really,
it's disgusting, to be honest. Like, how do you, like, I don't understand how people defend the other side sometimes. I sympathize with it, but in my case, it's like, no, he abused me. Case closed, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and that's a thing. Like, we could spend an hour talking about that too. Like,
we have.
Well, no, but I mean, that specific thing, we could talk, like, the other side, the defending the other side. Like, I'm sure we could talk about that for an hour, because, like, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, what's really interesting, like you've mentioned, is the fact that you've almost got to try to turn things off, I guess, to try and be like, I need to memorize this. I need to make sure memorize might be the wrong word, because people would be like, oh, it's scripted, which is not. That's bullshit. Like, you're literally trying to remember everything and make sure that you're trying to do it over and over and over again, so that in the stressful situation that is going to be the trial, especially if you get called up and cross-examined, is going to be, I need to give the factual answers and really try not to react to what they are saying, because they are going to try and get me to react, try and get me to be flustered, try and say something that isn't true, try and do all of these things. And so you're playing this over and over and over again to actually be able to be coherent and be accurate in your description when you're actually on trial. But yeah, it's fascinating that you have to like turn it off to basically be like, I'm trying to be emotionless while reliving all the details of this traumatic event to be able to coherently and accurately describe it to a bunch of people in a freaking room.
So this is going to make you want to like put your head through a wall.
Oh no.
This is one detail you don't know yet.
Oh no.
But the Crown actually had to determine whether they were going to use me as a victim or a witness to my own abuse. Meaning they didn't know if I was going to benefit the case more as somebody who just overheard something or oversaw something, as opposed to I'm the one that it happened to, when I'm the reason this whole case started. So I had to wait for confirmation on what my role was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. And you didn't find out until when?
January of 2022.
Wow.
What my role was.
Wow. That's wild.
So yeah, I had to wait 3 months after he was arrested to find out if I was considered a victim, which means if there is a trial, I will be on the stand. There's not an if or buts about it. I will be. And I will give a victim impact statement. And I've kind of already started putting some of it together, because some things come to me at certain times where I'm like, yes, that is exactly how I've been feeling. And hopefully it just makes sense when I actually say it, if I say it. So
yeah, no kidding. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Which is really, wow. Like I mean, like you said, the fact that you're just going through this, like reliving it over and over and over again to get justice, it talks volumes to who you are as a person and the warrior that you are for going through all of this bullshit to be able to get justice for this. So again, like you are awesome. And like the fact that you're doing this is just incredible. So, just again, thank you for just doing this as another human being. Just doing this is amazing. And for anybody else that's ever been affected by, sexual assault, like this is incredible that you're doing this. And like you said, protecting people in the future in whatever way, whatever ripple effect this has.
Yeah.
There will be some sort of positive ripple effect. And it will protect at least one person, which is all that we can do. And like I said, the fact that you're like talking about it in public and sharing so much information is just like, it's fantastic. It's very unfortunate, but it's fantastic. I know. Like I said, it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we have to have this conversation, but it is fantastic that you're willing to be able to put yourself through this to get justice and to share your story and whatnot.
This is a nice little precursor for what I'm going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Bit, right?
Yeah, no kidding. When you've been going through this, obviously you've said multiple times that there have been people within the community, the OPP, whoever it is, that doesn't believe you, that questions your efficacy, that questions your values and your integrity. In those moments, how have you stayed, I don't know if calm's the right word, how have you stayed centered? How have you continued to push forward with all of this noise about you're not telling the truth?
I knew I wasn't going to stop fighting, and I knew I wasn't certain when or how, but I know the truth will come out. And when he lost his license and I got the tattoo, I had started a post. I have a post on Instagram that explained that you picked the wrong girl. You picked the wrong victim, because now I've made it my mission to make sure you don't hurt anybody else. And I had wrote a whole description on everything that I felt, and that those people that look down on me, my head's held high, my name is cleared. And I had so many people private message me later and say, I bought into some bad information. I'm so sorry you went through this, or I didn't really believe what happened until all this went down. Even after he got arrested, like that was in the newspaper. That was actually on the radio when I was going to work the next day. So people started asking me, oh my God, is this that therapist that did that to you? Is this him? And I kept saying, yes, it is. And the crazy thing is, I wasn't allowed to share any of those articles, any of the radio news. I wasn't allowed to share any of that. It's crazy that could question my credibility could be in question for that. But they still protect the abuser even to this day, in my opinion. So
in what ways?
A lot of people. Your face disappeared, by the way. Where did you go?
I'm here. I promise. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, yours glitched out for a second, but that's okay. So in what ways? And I'm not trying to grill you or anything. I'm literally just curious. Okay. In what ways? Like, do you believe they still sort of protect the perpetrator through this process?
So, because I can't even share that article of him being arrested on my Facebook page. I can't say, yeah, this is the therapist that did this to me. Like, this is proof that I'm not lying. Like, I can't share, I can't comment on anything. I can't retaliate on anything. I can't. So to me, it's like, I'm still in a sense being silenced. So it's very hard to be like, okay, the news is allowed to say, hey, this guy got arrested and he's got many victims, but the victims can't actually say, yeah, I was one of them.
Yeah, like
it's hard.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Is there a specific, have they, I don't know how to ask this question, but did they give you a legitimate, a written out, reason for why you can't? Or did they call you and be like, don't do this? We won't believe you in court.
Yeah, they cautioned me against it, that it could ruin my credibility with the jury. And it blew my mind.
Yeah, no kidding.
I wasn't going to say anything. I just wanted to share it. I didn't even want to say anything. Enough people would have known that, okay, this is the guy. I'm allowed to cry at work on the line at Chrysler and talk to my supervisor about it coming out, but I can't actually share it on any type of media and actually try and heal myself. So,
yeah, no kidding. Yeah. And we're trying to be very careful with the information that we talk about here so that it doesn't do any credit, the
crazy thing is, anybody can look at what happened to me. It's on the College of Massage Therapy of Ontario website under this guy's name. So once this does come out, the only thing that story doesn't have is my name, but it's all there, black and white, everything he did.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if it had your name or not. Yeah.
No, that's the only thing it doesn't say is my name.
Yeah, so which is understandable, but understandable. But it does say all of that information about what had happened.
Everything.
Wow.
Even more so. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. And I'm sure it has some information from some of the other victims as well.
I don't know about that. I don't know if any of them came to the College of Massage Therapy. I don't know if they came forward now. So I don't know if that's a public thing. I never looked further into it. I rather, in a sense, I didn't want to torture myself more with other people's stories of what he did, because from what I was told by the OPP, all of our stories are very similar. But as the years went on, he progressed. So
yeah, and you said that after even after he lost his license, he was practicing illegally at his house.
He practiced illegally, and that's where the most recent case came out of, was his house from practicing illegally.
God, yeah, the fact that this person did this at an office, if you take that and say he was doing it at his house, you just think, what could he get away with there, in addition to everything that he was able to do?
He was practicing illegally. He lost his license. And he was still practicing. So that's another charge that got stacked on top of him, on top of the abuse. And he also had mischief charge and something regarding money as well. So there are many other charges on him outside of the sexual assaults, which, in a sense, I do feel horrible for him, and people might laugh and be like, why? But the fact that you lost your license and you still can't control yourself enough to stop, and he had children my age when he abused me all these years ago. He has a wife. I don't know if they're still by his side to this day, but that blows my mind. Like, you have a wife to, love and cherish. You don't need to abuse young women or people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if things do go to a trial, if he does decide that a trial is the way he wants to go, he's not pleading guilty, he will be in his 60s, like his mid 60s, and I'm still not even 30. So it just goes to show you how sad this individual is, and clearly something very traumatic happened in his life where he cannot stop. So I really hope he gets the help he needs, if anything.
Yeah. And like you said in that documentary, like, if nobody stands up, he'll just continue doing. And like you're saying right now, he even lost his license and he's like, oh, I can still find a way to do this. Yeah. Right. And again, like, this is why you should be so proud of yourself for doing what you're doing, because again, without you, this would not have gotten to the point that it's at. And he, like you said, he would find another way to do it, which is disgusting and crazy. But like you said, like, we really hope, like, the fact that you're able to say, like, I do feel bad for him because something is clearly wrong. Like, the mindset that you have is incredible, because like, I don't know how many people would really look at it that way. Like, where did you get this, like, real, like, unrelentless, or not unrelentless, where did you get this relentless, like, self-belief and mindset from? Like, where did this come from?
You're going to laugh at me, and it's totally fine. I watch so many murder documentaries on Netflix that, like, they always get into the psyche of why a person was the way they were or did what they did. And having a bit of a backstory sometimes let you know, like, wow, they were abused growing up and that's all they knew. Or like the whole Jeffrey Dahmer thing, like, he really liked taxidermy, and unfortunately he decided to start trying it on humans. I don't condone it. I'm absolutely disgusted by all of it. Let's make that clear to everyone listening to this.
Thank you for that distinction.
But what I'm saying is, I can understand how that transpired.
Yeah.
I can see how that happened now. It gives you some context. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean what this therapist did to me was right. But maybe there's some context as to why he did what he did. I'm not saying I condone. I'm not saying I wanted to go through it, or anybody deserves to, but I do sympathize with that side of his emotional state that is clearly underdeveloped. Mm-hmm. And maybe he doesn't know right from wrong in that situation. And if psychiatric help is needed, I hope that he gets it. And I hope one day, and it's crazy to say, that he even forgives himself. I haven't forgiven him yet. I'm not going to sit here and say I have, because I still have a lot of anger and depression and sadness and some PTSD and obviously my triggers. But I really do hope he finds peace in himself enough to stop hurting people. That's the type of peace I want him to have. I don't want him to go around thinking, oh, I'm a great person, because no.
Right.
But
right.
I want him to be at peace with himself enough to realize he can stop this destructive path and still turn the rest of his life around if that's what he wants.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, I want to touch on something, because like you mentioned forgiveness. You mentioned, you're like, I don't forgive him because I'm still going through so much. And, somebody might look at that and be like, oh, like, you're holding on to it, or, oh, like, I've heard it a number of times where they say, forgiveness is about you. It's not about the other person, right? Yeah. Like, it's about you. It's about you saying that you are relinquishing control and trying to move on. Now, for, like, in your situation, because you're reliving it so many times, because you're trying to practice almost being unemotional in remembering the traumatic experience so that you can say it while you're on the stand, because of all that, like, it makes sense that there isn't forgiveness, that there hasn't been forgiveness yet, because even you mentioned, like, you're not at a healing stage right now.
No. And that's the hardest part, I think, for me, is that I'm not at a healing stage. And, people don't know what to say or how to respond. And I think that's another thing that's really difficult for victims, survivors, whatever you want to call somebody, a warrior, But it makes it difficult because even if you do want to talk about it, you're not necessarily going to get the response you're looking for from somebody. And you can't expect them to respond a certain way.
Right.
They are going to respond how they want to respond. And or sometimes they don't know how to respond. Like my dad keeps saying, well, this is what you wanted. Okay, no, this is not what I wanted. I didn't want to go through this. I wanted justice for what happened now that it has happened. But, or sometimes you'll be like, well, just keep being strong. It's almost over. Well, thanks. I didn't think I was going to start being weak all of a sudden. Thank you. Like, it just, people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So sometimes when they say something to us, it sounds stupid because it's like, well, no shit. Of course I'm going to keep being strong. Like, what other choice do I have? But sometimes it's not about what you say. It's just knowing somebody's there for you. Yeah. And I think maybe we got to just shut up sometimes and just give somebody a hug.
Oh, 100%.
My advice for today, shut up and give someone a hug.
100%. I'm with you so much. And what's really interesting is like, you may be opening up to somebody, like opening up to somebody about this experience and being vulnerable and having that conversation can take a lot of energy. And sometimes, I know at least in my own healing process was, you're right. Like I was like, all right, I'm telling you this because I'm like looking for something. But sometimes I wouldn't get it. Sometimes like I'm talking to, somebody who's never been through something like that. So how can they have empathy? Like they can have sympathy, but how can they have empathy if they've never been through it? So sometimes it is really difficult. And like you said, people don't know how to respond. Some of the responses are just blunt and you're like, cool, like, thanks. All right.
Yeah.
Like,
I wish I never told you. And then you're embarrassed.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes for me, even, I don't even know how I want people to respond. Because sometimes my dad's like, well, what do you want from me? And I'm like, crap. Like, so I'm thinking, I'm not happy with how you're responding, but I don't know how I want you to respond. So what the hell?
Yeah.
So sometimes I just sit there and go,
yeah, I mean that's a really difficult and complex thing about healing is that sometimes you literally don't know. Like you don't see the path in front of you. You're doing what you think you should do or what your body's telling you to do, and it might not even be the right thing. And that's why earlier you mentioned like I went to therapy, I got this journal, I read this book, I did this like I did so many things to try and figure out, the way that I needed to heal. And it's ongoing work. It's not like you just, I read this book, I did this activity and dippity dabbity do, like I'm done. Like it's a healing can come up, like the healing process will continue. And like, you didn't expect to feel triggered in a yoga class, but it happened. And so you got to deal with what comes up. And I don't think, sometimes people forget about that. And sometimes I forget about that in my own life and with other people that are in my life when they're healing from stuff that has happened in the past. So it's a good reminder to remember that, like, one, I mean, you don't know everybody's story just by looking at them, or even some of your friends. Like, you don't really know all of the things that you're going through, but conversations like this can definitely help. And again, Carly, like, I appreciate you being on here. I appreciate you opening up and being vulnerable and courageous and literally opening the book that is your life to tell us like everything that's gone on, because again, it's not easy. It doesn't matter how many times you talk about it. It doesn't become easy to talk about this and to relive it. But again, like, I think that the more times we do have these conversations, the more we can normalize it, the more that maybe others that listen to this will feel like they can open up to somebody in their life about an experience that they've had. And, we can learn from each other. So really appreciate you being on here and sharing everything. And I wanted to, you kind of said, shut up and give everybody a hug, but I'm wondering if you have like another like piece of advice for either anybody who has been sexually abused that's going through this, or for somebody who hears about like a family member or a loved one that has been sexually abused. I'm wondering if you have any sort of like last sort of advice or thoughts.
So the number one thing I would say is be gentle on yourself. after abuse, whether it be from a family member or yourself. It's obviously very interconnected and you have a lot of emotions towards it. And just take time with yourself. Like, give yourself grace. Don't try and beat yourself up over it. Don't try and ignore it right away. Do whatever works for you. If healing one way works for you and somebody else is turned off by that, don't focus on that. Whatever you need is what matters. And my brain, the way I explain it, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie The Maze Runner, but the maze changes constantly. That's how my brain is when it comes to healing. One day I'm on one path and then the maze changes shape and I'm like, oh, we're going over here now. And then it changes again and I'm like, oh, okay, now we're going this way. So constantly changing. So just give yourself grace, be patient. Don't try and force or rush your healing or forgiveness. Don't do something because somebody else says that's what you should be doing. So just focus on yourself. It sounds simple, and it is, but it's difficult because after abuse, a lot of people question their own judgment. And I think it's important to realize that you still have good judgment. You still know right from wrong. And the reason that you know right from wrong is because you know you were abused. And once you understand that, you can start processing it how you need to. And, eventually, hopefully, get back to your everyday life to the best of your ability. Because it doesn't ever go away. But what happened to you does not define you. It is a part of your story, but it is not who you are.
Mic drop. No, thank you so much for that last message. The fact that you explain it like a maze changing, I couldn't think of a better way to describe it, because you're right. And something that I've experienced, and I maybe you've experienced it too, is, all right, like I'm going to do this thing for like 3 months. Like, I want to be healed in 3 months, or I want to get over this at this time, or something along those lines. Like, there's so many variations of that statement, but it's like, we want things to happen at a certain time, and sometimes they just don't, and things change. And like you said, talking to a therapist, writing in a journal, reading a book, talking to friends and family, there's so many different avenues to heal. Sometimes some of them work, sometimes some of them don't. And so we got to navigate that maze. And as simple as it might sound, to put yourself first and to accept the change that is the maze, obviously, especially after traumatic events, that is extremely difficult to do. And I just, I really hope that, anybody listening to this conversation is inspired by your courageousness and your vulnerability, and is willing to take a step in their healing process, whatever that may be. Because again, at the end of the day, like that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Carly,
mic drop on your end too.
Yeah, I guess so. So we didn't get into anything about the Ironman. We already said that we have to have a follow-up, interview after this trial actually happens. So we are going to have another conversation at some point. Just don't know exactly when that'll be. Again, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared. And I'm sure that, at least one person will be inspired by what they've heard today.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it and that it inspired you on your journey to living your best life. Now make sure to check out the show notes below for a rundown of today's show with all the important links, such as where to find the guest online and important resources that they may have mentioned. Also, make sure to share this episode with a friend or family member and subscribe so you get the notifications when new episodes are released. I absolutely love hearing feedback from you guys, so I encourage you to share a review on the platform you're listening on and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from today's episode. Now it's time to go out and build the life of your dreams one step at a time. And remember, the only way to be comfortable is to be uncomfortable first.